Hey-ho, Kermit. Nope. Sorry, that was almost a short hop to a long legal process. This is Rich from Georgetown, Indiana, and I listen to Scandal Water in the car, which isn't remarkable, until you factor in I made up errands, just so I could tune in and hear what the ladies say. Ladies?
Welcome to Scandal Water, where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
And Ashley
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
Oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1. Stories in Scandal Water, it's where you need to be. Stories in Scandal Water, let's pour you a cup of tea.
Good morning, Ashley.
Good morning.
We are back recording again.
Yes.
It's been a while.
It has been a long break for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. You came from some warmer weather, right?
I
But
did.
it is cold today.
It is, you were not prepared.
No, I threw on my clothes. I'm like in shorts and a t-shirt. And I pull up and Ashley's like,
You brave woman.
Candy, do you need sweatpants?
Yes.
That's funny. Well, we're doing another fun episode today. And if you were paying attention to the shout out, guys, you had a little bit of a preview because that was our friend and friend of the show, Rich, who does a very nice impression of a character we know very well.
Kermie.
Yes. But I thought it would be fun to actually let you hear a short clip from the real deal.
All right.
HIJKLMNOP QRS. Cookie Monster isn't a letter of the alphabet. It goes QRS. Cookie Monster. You're just teasing me. W, X, Y, and Z. Now I know my ABCs. Next time Cookie Monster. Next time Cookie Monster can do it with you. I'm leaving. I love you. I love you too. Thanks.
That's so cute.
While doing my research, that was one of my favorite
Oh
clips.
my gosh.
And when they say I love you
Yeah, I
to each other
know.
and there's that little kiss,
I
I
know.
thought, what better way to start this episode,
Yes.
which is centered on Jim Henson and his Muppets, than with a lovely little clip like that.
I love the Muppets.
Yes. And you know what? This is a great time to be remembering the Muppets and Jim Henson because you reminded me of this. As we're recording this, it's mid-May, but by the time this airs, it will be just past the celebration of the 45th anniversary of the Muppet movie. What Ashley shared with me was a little notice that in celebration of that event, they are putting the movie back in theaters for 2 days only on June 2nd and June 3rd, which of course is in the past for you guys. And hopefully some of you all were able to catch that because I
Yeah.
think that would be super fun. But heading into this episode, I thought we would do a little test yourself.
Oh?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask you 5 questions, but I'm not going to give you the answers. The answers are going to come in the episode. I know a lot of times we go ahead and we answer it right away.
I see,
But
I see.
this will be just kind of a little guide to go
Okay.
through the episode. So, question number 1, what does the term Muppet stand for, or how did it originate?
Do you want me to answer that or
If
wait?
you want to, it's up to you. Do you want to take a stab at it now? And then you
I
can
think it's marionette puppet.
Okay. Number 2, which characters on Sesame Street are Muppets?
What do you mean? I thought they all were Muppets. Are some just puppets?
So your answer is all of them?
Say it again. Which characters what?
Which characters on Sesame Street are Muppets?
Oh, okay. Well, Big Bird is not because he's not a puppet. Well, he's not a marionette puppet. Snuffleupagus is not. I'm gonna... Gosh. Bert and Ernie, Cookie Monster, Grover. Those are the ones I remember. Okay. That's my guess.
All right. Number 3, is Yoda a Muppet? And what connection, if any, does Jim Henson have with Yoda?
Yes. Marionette puppet. Well, I don't know if they have strings on him, but the little sticks could be that. I'm going to say yes, he is. And the connection is Frank Oz is the voice of Yoda, who is also the voice of Miss Piggy.
Number 4, why do some of the Muppet Show episodes now start with warning messages?
Oh, I don't know that one.
Number 5,
Like old episodes? They've added them in or new episodes?
original episodes that have warning messages.
Ooh, okay, I don't know.
Number 5, which Muppets song charted on the Billboard's Top 100?
Why are there so many songs about rainbows? That one.
Okay. All right. We'll see how
See
you
how I
did
did.
as we move along.
I hope you wrote down the answers because I won't remember what I said.
I've got them somewhere. Well,
Yeah.
we'll remember. It'll be
Okay.
fine. I like to always ask, what's your background? Are you a Muppets fan?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen, I know I've seen the Muppet movie. I've seen the Muppet Show. I love the Muppet Show. I've seen Muppet Babies. I watched
Okay.
Muppet Babies. That's how dedicated I was. Oh, Fozzie. Fozzie, I think, is a Muppet too.
Okay.
But I don't know. Yeah, I love it. I
Okay.
love the Muppet movies. I like the two Muppet movies I like the best, Muppet Treasure Island and the Muppet Christmas Carol.
All right. And your favorite character or characters?
I don't know. I like them all. I mean, I like Kermit. I don't know. I like them all. I just like everybody.
All of them. All right.
I don't
Good
have anybody
deal.
I dislike.
Well, then this will be a good episode. 'cause
Except
you'll
maybe
be
that big
able to-
scary guy. What's his name? Like George or something? The big monstery looking one? I mean, I have nothing against him. He's just a little frightening to
He
me.
just wasn't real warm and fuzzy for you. Okay.
no.
Well, since you know so much about it and you're such a
Gonzo.
big fan,
He's also, I think he's a Muppet. Sorry, keep going.
you can chime in
Okay.
as we go along. Feel free. I'm going to confess to you, I was not a huge Muppet.
Really?
No, I
Maybe
wasn't.
it was just not in your, you were watching something else.
I don't think Muppets, like puppet things, have always been a big thing for me.
Now, don't Dark
However-
Crystal, get that away from me. The Dark Crystal, you can step back, Dark Crystal, because I am not about that life. But no, I like the Muppets. Light, frothy, fun. Secret of Nim, all that never-ending story. Holy heck, that big. What is that thing? The white thing, the dog
I
that
never
he.
saw it.
No,
Yeah.
I posted on Facebook one time because Walmart thought algorithm. Let's show that girl Falcor. Let's show her a Falcor toy. I was like, get it away, get it away. It frightens me so bad.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
Well, as I was saying, going into this, it was a topic that you suggested, and I'm like, okay, that's great. I didn't feel like I would be super connected to it, but I knew I'd find it interesting. And that's what was cool, because as I did start researching, I did get drawn into it. There's
Yes,
so
they're
much
so
there's so much
fun.
about this that is fascinating. And then there were a couple of connections that I did not realize until I was doing this. So
Did you know that I look like a Muppet?
which one? What are you talking about?
So my friend Craig is the first one that pointed this out. But if you look up the Muppet Jan that's in the band, because of my super straight hair.
Okay, we have to post a picture of you, a side by side of you with Jan, because I don't know this
Oh
character.
my
At the break,
gosh.
you can
I'll show
me.
you.
Okay.
But her hair's like this. And
Okay,
then
you
with
all
my
right
super
now, she is taking her bangs and she's like spreading them all across her forehead.
said to Jan. Craig said I look like Jan.
All right, side by side.
Okay,
we
we'll do
promise a side by side. I love it. Well, let's go ahead and jump in because you guys are going to learn a whole lot about Jim Henson today and the Muppets. You're going to find this as fascinating as I did, I think. Everybody already knows it was the brainchild of Jim Henson, but I don't think that we actually all understand necessarily the rest of what he brought to us, the genius and the innovation behind this man. Like I think we all just kind of think of him as a puppeteer,
Right.
Like, you know, and
We think of them as real people. That's how innovative this was. You don't
That's
think
a
of
good
them as
point.
being Muppets.
And that's one of the things that people said about him in their tributes. They would say he's the first one who actually made puppets so lifelike that we think of them
As people.
as people, as real characters, you know, versus these things that are being manipulated by humans. Yeah. Well, there's actually a new documentary by Ron Howard
Oh,
that is going to
nice.
be out by the time this episode airs.
Oh,
it is
good.
called Jim Henson Idea Man, and it's scheduled to start streaming May 31st on Disney Plus. And part of the promo for that reads, quote, featuring unprecedented access to Jim's personal archives, Howard brings us a fascinating and insightful look at a complex man whose boundless imagination inspired the the world.
Oh, I love that.
So after this episode, if you are still interested, I recommend you go check that out.
I
Because
will
I
be.
feel like Ron Howard always does,
He does good
really
stuff.
quality work.
And being a child actor, too. I don't know if that would have anything to do with it, but he's been in the business since he was a literal child.
Right. Yeah, he knows it inside out. So, well, how did Jim get started down this path? A lot of nice information came from the Henson Company website. So I want to give them a little bit of a shout out. And of course, I trust them fully. I mean, these are the people who know.
They would know.
So they had some really good stuff. So on that website, it shared that throughout his entire youth, Jim had an interest in art and then later television, because it's interesting to think about the fact that that medium was actually first coming
That's
into
amazing.
use
Yeah.
as he was growing up, because he was born in 1936.
Wow.
And it also told how he was influenced by his maternal grandmother, who he was very close to. She was also an artist. She was an avid painter, a quilter, a needleworker, and she's one of the big influences in his life who pushed him towards pursuing his art and pursuing things that were in his imagination. So while he was still in high school in 1954, Jim began his television career performing puppets on a local Washington, D.C. Saturday morning program on WTOP TV. And then the following year, while he was a freshman in college at
Wow.
the University of Maryland, he was given his own twice daily 5-minute show called Sam and Friends on a local NBC affiliate. His assistant on the project was another University of Maryland student named Jane Nebel, who would go on to become his wife.
The way you were saying that, you had like that romance tone. I was like, they're going to get
know.
married.
You knew it was coming.
I did.
But I'm thinking about this, like, what was I doing as a freshman in college? I mean,
Right. Yeah, we weren't that innovative.
no. So according to the Henson Company bio for Jim, they said that together the two of these people, quote, introduced many Muppet mainstays, music, snarky humor, and innovative technical tricks, such as eliminating the puppet stage and using the television itself as the proscenium. Perhaps most memorably, the show featured an early version of Kermit the Frog. Except it was so fun because they talked about this. He was actually more of a lizard.
Really?
When he started, he was more of a lizard, and they frogified him over the years. Yeah.
Frogified him.
So I found this whole thing fascinating. I wanted to dig into it a little bit more. So I'm gonna follow this train here, because I
Okay.
found a 2022 article promoting a book written by this author and historian named Craig Shemin, and some of the insights that he shared I thought were fascinating. The title of his book, by the way, is Sam and Friends: The Story of Jim Henson's First Television Show. And in this book, apparently, it gives the entire backstory of how he came to have this gig, Sam and Friends, and you know, everything that went on behind the scenes. It first aired in 1955. It was a 5-minute show, as we said, that aired twice a day. And that article included quotes from Jim's daughter, Lisa, who said that this experience doing this TV show had a huge impact on his career. She said, quote, "The Muppets were invented right there in that studio. My father never would have even taken up puppetry were it not for the fact that that station wanted to have a show with puppets." Kermit, of course, we've said, kind of originated from this, but the article pointed out that a lot of the learning and the growth that Jim experienced while he was working on that show is what led to what we all think of today, right? They said that some of the things that we take for granted because we've been watching the Muppets all these years were not happening back in that time period. Having the characters lip sync, you know, matching their mouths with the words.
Okay.
The way the hand movements matched and complemented the words. Those are basic techniques that they said were not really happening prior to this. The same guy, this author of the book, Craig Shemin, commented, "Jim did an enormous amount with very simple materials. Kermit was made from his mother's coat and a ping pong ball. You can't get simpler than that." The other thing that I loved that came out of this article was that Craig pointed out, while she never got a lot of credit, which was often her own doing,
Yeah.
because they said that Jane would always deflect any praise she was getting towards Jim. But they said Jane, who married Jim in 1959, was a partner in his work, especially in those early years, and she did more behind the scenes than people realize.
See, just like Alma Hitchcock.
Yeah,
We're giving me Alma Hitchcock right here.
exactly. They said the pair basically created the Muppets together. We think of Jim Henson, but it was a partnership.
We need to do a series sometime on these misses that are like the right hand, the literal partner of these guys that have more fame.
Yeah. And you know what I love? On the Henson Company website, they have a page labeled Our Founders, and they have both of them on it. Yes.
Good.
Made me happy to see that Jim and Jane were right there. Even before they were married, though, in 1958 was when they made it official. Jim and Jane founded Muppets Incorporated. So let's pause there for a second to answer that question number one. The name Muppets, this is funny. We don't know for sure the answer because Jim contradicted himself.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yes, he did. He has been quoted. Like, these are quotes that he gave in interviews. They're out there. They're factual. At one point, he confirmed, he said, it's a combination of the word marionettes and puppets.
Okay.
Okay. And then years later, he was questioned about that, and he said, no, I just needed something to say.
Oh.
He said, it's not really about that. I'm paraphrasing, but he said, basically, I just needed some kind of name to differentiate
from a puppet.
Our style of puppetry from normal puppets. So that's just a term we came up with.
But it would make sense that marionette puppet, because they do use the little, it's not just a hand, it's
some of the sticks, but
then
it's not above.
It's not strings.
It's not
No,
strings.
it's sticks.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know.
it is different. We are not positive.
Okay.
Because he's contradicted himself. But so Sam and Friends, that show that we've already mentioned, ran until 1961, and that had popularity. And so it led to other opportunities, such as guest appearances on national network programs like The Steve Allen Show, The Jack Parr Show, and Today. And Jim also got some work making lots and lots of these funny commercials for sponsors throughout the country. So they're growing. And in 1961, Jim and Jane brought on another puppeteer and writer named Jerry Jewell.
Muppeteer, you mean?
There we go. And so basically that's the first where they started to expand. And because of all their national TV appearances, they moved their family to New York in 1963. Then they started to need more help because they got a gig doing weekly appearances on Today and started getting hired for even more commercial gigs. They are starting to bring on more people, and one of those was a young puppeteer, or muppeteer, as you say, named Frank Oz. It said in this resource that I was looking at that together they helped develop the Muppets' first nationally known character, Ralph the dog.
Ralph the dog! I love Ralph the dog. Yes, we had a Muppet. I guess it was actually a puppet of Ralph the dog.
Did you?
We did.
And you played with it? Your family did?
Yes,
you mean?
yes.
Oh, love it. Well, he began to appear regularly on the Jimmy Dean Show between the years of 1963 to 1966.
Wow.
So I'm thinking about this is so interesting to think about. This is something that's grabbing. It's innovative. It's different. And talk shows.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The fact that talk shows are bringing them on, that's kind of a big deal. Jim continues to bring on more talent. He's pursuing his career in both puppetry and filmmaking. Okay. So he's branching out a little bit. Between 1964 and 1969, he produced several experimental films. And the website commented that these projects were important because it continued to expand Jim's knowledge of film techniques, and then that in turn would lead it back to the Muppets again. It would lead to more innovations with the Muppets. And so an interesting side note is that on their website, they commented it was in 1965 that Jim started keeping something called his Red Book. Have you heard about that?
I have not.
It's super cool. They had little pictures of it. So basically, he started journaling. He would record his thinking, his notes. He would sketch things. It is so cool because we'll put a few pages of it in our show notes, but it might just be, he didn't write a lot. It wasn't like he would write paragraphs.
Snatches.
It would be
of
a couple
stuff.
of sentences, and then there might be like a diagram or a sketch or an idea. It is this incredible think book or idea book.
Nice.
Super cool. But moving through this timeline, in 1967, they changed the company name from Muppets Inc. to HA, which stands for Henson Associates, and it stayed HA until 1989, which is when it finally became Jim Henson Productions. Okay. But around 1968, this is where we had the breakthrough experience for this company when they became involved with
Sesame Street?
Yes!
Sesame Street.
This is where I got excited.
That's where you came in.
Because you know what? I had never put it together
You
that Jim
hadn't?
Henson was associated with Sesame Street.
I thought he was Sesame Street.
He kind of is.
I thought it wasn't a thing until he came around. I didn't know it existed before him. We're on opposite ends.
This took me, I always thought of him as Muppets. Like I literally, and that's something they brought out was people have two different associations with Muppets. Some people think of Muppets as Jim Henson and his work.
Yeah.
Other people think of it as this type of puppet, this puppetry idea.
I guess
like
I'm
the
one of the people
style.
that thinks of it as Jim Henson. It's him.
Yeah.
All of this is him.
Yeah. Well, I had not put it together. So this is where all of a sudden I was like, what? This is amazing. What is happening? So here's the backstory.
Yeah, because that's right. When we were talking about our themes, you were like, why don't we do Sesame Street? I was like, well, just do Jim Henson. I guess we weren't even connecting it then.
I was thinking, yes, I was just like, let's just do a whole episode on Sesame Street.
Yeah.
Okay, well, here you go.
Here's our Sesame Street
right.
section.
So in 1966, this is a cool story. A public television producer named Joan Gans Cooney started working on this groundbreaking educational children's television program, which is going to turn into Sesame Street. And by the way, it premieres in 1968. But here's how it came about, okay? John Stone was the original head writer for Sesame Street and one of the 3 original producers of the program. In an interview, he shared that, we've heard this before in some of our other episodes, that in the 1960s, children's television was, in his words, just terrible stuff.
Scooby-Doo, right? That's
Yeah,
where you
we
talked
talked about that. Yeah. He said, I hated it. One day, this experimental psychologist and somebody who was part of this Carnegie Corporation, a guy named Lloyd Morissette, was at a dinner party with this TV producer we just named, Joan Cooney, and they were talking about different things. And he shared with her this idea that he'd been thinking about. Turns out that Lloyd Morissette and his Carnegie colleagues were very concerned because they had noticed there was an education gap between kids who were, I guess, a little more privileged versus those that were not. And in particular, one of the things they noticed was that children who didn't have access to a lot of attention from adults and parents and a lot of work prior to going into school had big deficits. And sometimes that was related to your circumstances or, you know, what you had access to. So data was showing that TV was huge with kids. Children were watching hours upon hours of TV because this was, first of all, it was, you know, television was growing. And secondly, you needed something for your kids to do if you were doing other things. And so he had watched his own 3-year-old daughter and he had noticed she could sing jingles. She was totally engrossed in television. She was just sucked into it. And so he started thinking, could we use television for something good?
Yeah.
Could we use it for something educational? So when he figured out that this lady, Joan Cooney, was in the TV business, he suggested this to her. She came up with the idea of using experts from the different worlds of education, entertainment, advertising, psychology, bringing them together and trying to create this new experimental type of show that would make learning fun.
I like it.
Yes, and according to the National Museum of American History, which they have an exhibit there on the Sesame Street program, and so this was part of their little overview, they said, quote, the mission of the show was to provide pre-kindergarten education to a diverse audience through memorable musical numbers, puppet performances, colorful cartoons, and deliberate representation of America's multicultural population.
Yeah.
So they formed the Children's Television Network and they started doing a ton of researching because, again, this was not just like throw something on TV. This was going to be so incredibly thoughtful. They even did hours upon hours of focus group testing with real nursery school kids. And then somebody said, you know, we ought to bring in Jim Henson.
Well, yeah.
He does a lot with puppets. And so that's what changed everything because they give so much credit to, had he not become involved, had somebody not suggested that, where would Sesame Street have gone? But they
nowhere.
Right. They said to him, we need you to populate Sesame Street.
Yeah.
You know,
What
you've got to create these characters.
Yeah.
Some of the characters that he brought in, we've already said, Ernie and Bert, Oscar the Grouch, Grover, Cookie Monster.
You know who Ernie and Bert are named for, right?
Yeah,
The trivia?
Yes. Tell us.
It's from Ernie and Bert in It's a Wonderful Life. Bert
love
and Ernie.
that.
in It's a Wonderful
Yeah.
Life. Okay, keep going.
Well, and of course, Big Bird, we've just said. Because it was an educational program, they didn't just make up the characters either. Everything was intentional. They would think about curriculum needs or, you know, specific targets they had for the kids, and they would bring in characters that matched. So according to Wikipedia, they gave an example. Oscar the Grouch was designed to teach children about their positive and negative emotions.
Oh.
Yeah. So that brings us to
Wait.
question 2.
Hang on. Have you heard the joke about the count?
No.
I'm going to get it wrong. But I think it's something like, who's your favorite vampire? The one that lives on Sesame Street. Does he count? I can assure you he does.
Cute.
Okay, what's our answer to question 2?
Well, question 2, I asked you which of the characters on Sesame
Now I'm
Street
thinking
were
all.
Muppets.
It's all.
Yeah,
They're all.
they said the short answer is all of them
All
are
of them.
Muppets if they are not human or animated.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny. I had it in my notes. This clarification. Some people think of the term Muppets as being synonymous with the Muppet Show, but the way that we generally use the term is broader, meaning any of the puppet creatures fashioned by Jim Henson's group.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
in their distinctive style. So, as we said, Sesame Street debuted in 1969, and it is still running today. It's under the name Sesame Workshop.
Oh, it is? It's not called Sesame Street anymore?
Well, no, the group.
Oh,
the group
okay,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, no, it's still called Sesame Street.
Okay.
But I found the very first episode. I did. I didn't watch all the way through, but I watched a big chunk of it from 1969.
Is it amazing?
It was so cool. I mean, because it was watching the very beginning of it, because,
Yeah.
by the time I was, I remember it a little
In the
differently.
80s.
It had
I
already
would've been in the
changed a little
80s,
bit, but it was just the neatest thing. And something else I found. Now, this was actually in a tribute episode that the Muppets put out to Jim Henson after his passing, but I'm going to share this tiny, tiny clip that they had pulled from the first Sesame Street episode.
What are we gonna do for a title? Open up New Worlds, Street, hey Ralph? Why don't you call your show Sesame Street? My entire career as a TV educator nipped in what was that? Sesame Street. Like Open Sesame. It kind of gives the idea of a street where neat stuff happens. Kermit, why, you're a genius. Mwah!
I loved
I
that.
know.
I'm not sure if I'd ever thought about why it was called Sesame Street, but
Open Sesame.
that's beautiful.
It is.
So perfect. So, of course, Sesame Street was incredibly successful. It was just so well received, and it gave the company a huge boost. It gave them a lot of credibility. They started to expand, like even within the context of Sesame Street, they started doing things like adding more live action, those animated shorts. Like they were broadening their expertise even within Sesame Street, but it also gave them the opportunity to expand what they were doing outside Sesame Street, because not only did it give them a lot of financial gain, but it opened doors for them. And one of the things that Jim Henson really wanted to do was he wanted to entertain a broader audience than preschoolers, and he wanted to move outside a morning time slot. He felt convinced the Muppets would play
At night?
at night.
The
And
Muppet
to-
Show.
Yes.
It's the Muppet Show.
Why don't we take a break? When we come back, let's pick up with the Muppet Show.
Okay.
June, the time for swimming pools, snacks, and summer vacations.
For our mini-sode this month, we thought we'd get a little personal and share some of our own summer travel experiences, whether from the bottom of a canyon or the top of a castle.
If you'd like to listen to our adventures, go to our website, scandalwaterpodcast.com, and click the coffee cup icon in the bottom right corner. From there, just follow the instructions to become a member.
It's your financial support that allows us to keep producing this show, and it is appreciated more than you know.
Cheers! And we are back. And while we were on break, Ashley found that
It's Janice, not Jan. I keep calling her Jan, but her name is Janice.
she was doing a lovely impression. She was showing me how she
can
moves to
dance.
the music. Yeah. So she has promised to record a short clip for us,
Yes,
and
I
so
will do
we'll be
that.
able to do that side by side. We promised. All right, love it. So when we left off before the break, we were leading into the Muppet Show, and Jim had that idea for quite some time, but he could not seem to sell it in the U.S.
Why?
I guess they probably, at that time, it would have been a different idea
I
to put
guess.
something
Yeah.
that most people perceive as
As
being
the
very
kids.
children-based,
Yeah.
children-focused
Yeah.
in primetime slots,
True.
He tried to do it for years. And then finally he got backing from a London-based television producer, and that's what allowed them to start working on the production. And The Muppet Show aired in 1976. Now, you can chime in here because you watched it a lot more than I did, but of course, it was hosted by Kermit the Frog, and I think everybody knows Jim Henson, of course, voiced
Kermie,
along with a lot of other characters. But we also had Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem Band.
That's what Janice was in.
Yep. Think about this. Every time they brought on a new project, they were also creating
New characters.
It wasn't just like we're taking all of the people we've already, all the characters we've already developed and we're just like sliding them over here. No, they are creating new characters and new worlds in some instances. Some of the characters you probably remember from the Muppet Show were Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, and Animal. All three of those, by the way, were performed by Frank Oz.
Nice.
The Great Gonzo and Rizzo the Rat were a couple more. And then, of course, the Muppets were joined every week by a different guest star. Everybody from Gene Kelly to Steve Martin to Julie Andrews
great.
to Johnny Cash.
Yeah. And then two of my favorites are Statler and Waldorf, the two old men that make fun of them up in the audience from their little booth.
I never knew their names until I was doing this.
Really?
Yeah.
I always got them confused. I know it's Statler and Waldorf, but I always wanted to call them Waldorf and Astoria, but it's not.
Not surprisingly to Jim, it was a smash hit. I mean, the Muppet Show was incredibly popular.
Jim knew.
Yeah, he knew. Right. Again, every time they had successes like that, it would open more doors. So that then led to 6 feature films. The first one we've already alluded to, the Muppet Movie, was released in 1979. And not only was it a big success, but of course, it also generated a hit song.
Yes.
Rainbow Connection was written by Paul Williams and Kenny Asher for the film, sung by Kermit, of course, and became so popular it reached number 25 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed in the top 40 for 7 weeks.
It's a good song. It's a sweet song.
It really is. It was nominated for 2 Oscars for Best Original Song and also the score. And just 3 years ago, in 2021, the Library of Congress named Kermit the Frog's The Rainbow Connection as one of the songs that it wanted to add to the National Recording Registry that year.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's
right.
kind of a big deal.
And again, some people are just
A
thinking
banjo-playing frog.
Right. Just this is a kid's
Yeah.
little character, and look at this. An interesting piece of trivia is that you've said you've seen the movie. Do you
Yeah, a long time ago.
remember when that was performed, the Rainbow Connection?
It's in the swamp, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
It takes place, I don't know I ever saw it, but according to one source, it's basically kind of in the opening of the movie, and Kermit the Frog is sitting alone on a log in the middle of a swamp plucking on his banjo, and that's when he sings the song. And
It's his I Want song.
this is the authenticity that they would go for. In order to do that, they wanted to have this very real looking environment. So Jim Henson did the scene submerged underwater inside a cramped diving bell,
Bless that
holding
man.
Kermit through a rubber sleeve.
Bless that man.
It's
That is
crazy.
so good.
Yeah, the movies continued to come over the next couple of decades. We had everything from The Great Muppet Caper to The Muppets Take Manhattan, The Muppet Christmas Carol, Muppet Treasure Island,
Yes.
and Muppets from Space. So
Do you know? Okay. Here's the part to insert this. Do you know why the Muppet Christmas Carol and Muppet Treasure Island are considered to be the 2 best ones? Because Michael Caine treated the fellow Muppets as fellow actors, and Tim Curry acted as if he was a fellow Muppet. So they had 2 different approaches, which just made it so good.
so entertaining. You've shared that Michael Caine piece of trivia before. I'm trying to think. It was in one of our Christmas episodes.
Probably.
Yes, but I don't think you've ever mentioned that about Tim Curry.
Yeah, he acted
Love
like a fellow
it.
Muppet.
Well, the 80s were a huge time for the Henson Company, which actually is going to bring us to question number 3. Was
Yoda?
Yoda a Muppet?
Oh, well, I thought so, but maybe I'm wrong.
Turns out not.
Really?
Right. So what happened was George Lucas asked Jim Henson to help bring Yoda to life, but Jim said no. He was too busy because of all these movies, all the projects he was working on. He recommended his very incredibly talented partner in the work, Frank Oz. I actually found an interview where Frank Oz is talking about his involvement with Yoda, and it was so interesting.
Cool.
So interesting. But I got to hear straight from Frank Oz himself, because you know how it is. There's conflicting information.
Yeah.
I wanted to know definitively, was Yoda a Muppet or not?
I guess if we're defining Muppets as anything that Jim Henson created, then you're right. He's not, because it's not created by Jim Henson. But for me, it's because Frank Oz voiced it that I thought, well, yeah, of course, because it's Frank Oz. So that means it is.
Right. But he straight up says Yoda was created by Stuart Freeborn. He was a makeup artist who worked for George Lucas, and he did design and fabricate Yoda. As we've said, Frank Oz was the puppeteer who brought him to life and did his voice, and it was so interesting for him to share. He actually commented, he had nothing but praise for the fella who had created Yoda, Stuart Freeborn, but he commented that because he was not on the Muppet team, and he actually, I think he was pretty new to designing, that's why what I haven't said yet is that Jim Henson did serve as a consultant.
Okay.
So Jim gave some advice.
Yeah, but he didn't create him.
Right, he didn't create him, and he wasn't actually part of the project, right? But this fella, Stuart, had advice and some guidance, but he was on his own really creating it. And so one of the comments that Frank made was that he didn't build Yoda in the same way, he didn't design him in the same way that they were used to, which made some operational things more challenging.
Okay.
Yeah, it just didn't, like, he didn't handle the same way. And then I thought this was the coolest thing. Frank Oz was talking in this interview, and he said people who don't operate puppets like this probably don't understand how technical everything is. He said, for example, he goes, there's a glass of water sitting in front of you. You reach out, you pick it up, you take a drink.
Right.
He said, if I want to do that in a scene with a Muppet or with this puppet character, he said, first of all, 4 people were operating Yoda, 4 people who had to coordinate. And he's like, what comes first? Do you see the glass of water first? Is it a head turn to see the water? Is it an eye? Oh, you catch it out of the eye, and now the head turns. At what point does the hand start to reach?
Wow.
Does the hand start to reach before the eye sees it, before the head turns, or after the head turn? He started breaking it down, and I was like, oh my gosh.
This is really hard.
And then the fact that, okay, we want the eye noticing first. Now we want a slight head turn. Now we want the hand to start to move. How do you coordinate that now with 4 people? And that's a split second or two, right? It was absolutely fascinating to hear him talk. But likely one of the reasons that Jim had to turn George Lucas down was because even while they were working on some of those Muppet movies, they were also expanding into new stuff again. 2 very new, groundbreaking fantasy films, The Dark Crystal and Labyrinth.
I'm just going to skip this part, y'all. Candy's going to talk to you personally. I'll be in the other room.
That is so funny. Okay, well, tell us why you...
It's spooky and creepy. I don't know. I haven't seen it in so long, but it made me uncomfortable and scared.
It's funny because I saw so many reviews that talked about both films being groundbreaking, having a cult following, people even today really feeling so strongly about them. But people did comment on the fact that they were unsettling because you had all these positive associations with these Muppet characters who generally they're always in lighthearted, fun, sweet situations or, characters that you feel very safe around. And then all of a sudden they were thrown into these plot lines that had dark, adult, dangerous things happening, these themes that were just not typical.
Nope.
And that said that it kind of took people aback sometimes.
I was all the way aback. I was all the way in the other room aback.
Well, I've already mentioned it, but I'm going to come back to there was a tribute that the Muppets created for Jim Henson after his passing, and it was called Muppets Celebrate Jim Henson. And it was very well done, I will say. And several people spoke about him in that. One of those people was Steven Spielberg. And I wanted you to hear this short clip because I think it fits very nicely in this spot where we're talking about his fantasy films.
Jim Henson was a master storyteller whose most popular appeal focused on the adventures of a frog and his friends. But there were other kinds of stories he also told. Fantastic stories for which he invented entire worlds and enormously complex creatures. The faster Jim's imagination ran, the more delight he took in finding a technology to achieve this. He used tools of the special effects trade and then went outside the film world to find technology that hadn't ever been used before and even tried that out. With craftsmen at his creature shop in London, he developed fantastic creatures that were operated by cables, electronic rods, computers, and all sorts of radio controls. But the human drama was always there, laying at the heart of the story and creating the reason for his imaginary worlds to exist.
That's a good point, the human drama.
Yeah, I thought that was very well articulated. He brought out that he was the innovator. He created, he saw it in his mind, he knew what he needed, he knew what he wanted, and then he would go make it happen.
He was also Fraggle Rock, right?
Yes.
Down to Fraggle Rock. rock. Boom, boom.
Well, according to his bio on the Henson Company website, they spoke a little bit more about this. They said, inspired by the exquisite and intricate artwork of British illustrator Brian Froud, these two films that we've just been talking about challenged Jim to create new kinds of three-dimensional characters with advanced movement abilities in development for 5 years.
Wow.
The Dark Crystal utilized the talents of scores of designers, builders, technicians, and performers from across the globe. The result, a phenomenal showcase of puppetry and animatronics.
Animatronics. Maybe that's what spooked me. I'm gonna do
yeah.
it. I'm gonna do this, guys. Give me a second. I'm gonna look up Dark Crystal. I want to see what pictures come up. I think it's them two little girls. Oh, it's the bird. Oh gosh. Oh. Yeah, it's that bird thing and them two elfin looking. Nope, it's all a big nope. I'm so sorry, Jim. I really respect your innovation. I can't look anymore. Okay, I'm turning it off. There you go. No, it makes my eyes water. My eyes feel watery. Okay.
Well, what I thought was cool there was you heard Steven Spielberg reference the creature shop. Mm-hmm. Had you heard that term before?
I don't know.
I wasn't sure I had either. I looked a little deeper to figure out what it was. Here's what I discovered. In order to create, as we've said, these new creatures, this unique world, in this partnership with this illustrator, this British illustrator, Brian Froud, they gathered this large team of artists and experts from the field, and in 1979, they set all of them up in this old postal sorting facility.
Can you imagine walking into that place as just a person that didn't know what was what? You're walking in like, oh, all this stuff.
I think it would be fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, so scientific and experimental and also fun and, artistic, know? But they also had a workshop, the Henson Company did, in New York. In order to be able to tell them apart easily, he just called the one in London the Creature Shop.
Okay.
And again, according to the website, research, experimentation, and craftsmanship moved the group to the cutting edge of effects innovation, and they were well set to take on groundbreaking Henson projects like Labyrinth and The Storyteller, and outside projects like Dream Child. So this Creature Shop helped move them forward with lots of projects. The Dark Crystal was released in 1982. It did make a profit when it came out, but was not a huge success. However, over the years, it has gained a cult following, like we said. And we talked about why at first some people might have been a little put off by the
animatronics.
Well,
it's the same thing in the Star Wars when he goes into that, when those things sing, those animatronics that sing, and I don't know, that spooked me too.
Yeah, that juxtaposition of these dark themes against these characters that you think of as being super lighthearted, I think that just took people by surprise. But again, over time, very highly,
it's picked up in popularity.
Yeah, lots of popularity, lots of praise. But as a side note, about 5 years ago, there was a TV series created as a prequel to the story. It was called Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. It did win an Emmy, but was not renewed for season 2, so it didn't have a huge following.
I'm not sad about that.
Yeah, you're not. How about for them?
I'm so sorry for y'all.
Yeah. But back into the timeline, Jim and this fella, Brian Froud, collaborated again on the feature film Labyrinth, which was produced by George Lucas. And I'm not sure if we said this already, but it starred David Bowie and Jennifer Connelly.
You had not.
Oh, okay. That came out in 1986. It also did not do great at the box office, but again, it has become a cult classic, and it did do well on home video and then later on DVD, which helped to gain that popularity. So in addition to all this work in film, the Ha Company was also doing a lot of television shows, one of which you've named. Fraggle Rock debuted in 1982.
Yes.
And then, of course, we also had Muppet Babies, which came out in 1984, and it said it was made in collaboration with Marvel Productions. I'm not sure. I don't know if that's
Interesting.
our Marvel or if that's a different Marvel, but yes. The Muppet Babies was awarded 4 consecutive Emmys for Outstanding Animated Program.
It was pretty outstanding, I remember.
Didn't watch that one, so I wasn't sure. But other projects, we had The Storyteller, Jim Henson's Greek Myths.
I don't remember The Storyteller at all.
I don't either. Yeah. Well, and apparently his last project was Muppet Vision 3D, a short multimedia film and interactive attraction, which he directed and appears, according to a quick Google search, to still be running at Disney's Hollywood Studios.
It is. I actually took some photos.
Oh, did you?
Outside of it, yes. There's a Miss Piggy fountain, and they've got statues. So knowing we were doing this episode when I got back, I took a couple photos.
All right, we'll have to put some of those on our show notes too. But the website noted that it holds a special place in Muppet history because it was the last film released that was directed by Jim Henson and the last to feature his voice as Kermit the Frog. But sadly, he did not ever have a chance to see the completed project because he passed away so unexpectedly. I actually found the video clip of this, but his last known performance, Jim Henson's last known performance as Kermit, was when he was a guest on the Arsenio Hall show in 1990. It was so... Okay.
How do you interview a Muppet?
Well, it was, I'm going to say, in my mind, Jim Henson and those Muppets, they're so squeaky clean. And on the Arsenio Hall show, when they kind of made a few off-color jokes or things,
You were shocked.
it took me aback.
Oh,
it
my.
It did. But no, but to hear him do the voices live like that, it was very cool. He did that performance. Weeks later, he was rushed to the hospital after unexpectedly falling sick, and he passed away on May 16th, 1990. He was only 53
Gosh,
years
that's
old.
so young.
Most of the sources, you have things, different
Yeah.
sources label things differently.
Yeah.
Most of them said streptococcus pneumonia
Oh,
and some type of this massive bacterial infection.
yeah.
Here is a quote from one newspaper. Tragically, the acute infection had already progressed to such an extent that he had multi-organ failure, kidney failure, inability of the blood to clot, heart failure, and shock.
Gosh.
And actually, I do know my source. That was from the Los Angeles Times, and it was a statement that had been put out by the hospital. And they went on to say, at this stage, high-dose antibiotics could not reverse the process.
That's awful. That's just awful.
They ended up holding 2 public services for him, one in New York and one in London. And I watched one of those services, and it was very touching. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. But here's something that I found so interesting. 4 years before this, in 1986, Jim had written 2 letters. One apparently for his children, another addressed more generally to friends and family. And he had shared some personal messages to them in these letters. And one of the things he also talked about was what he wanted his funeral service to be
Wow.
like. Now,
That's not an age you would typically start thinking about
No.
that stuff.
no. Now, I wonder if it was connected to his divorce from Jane.
Aw.
Because they also separated and I believe officially divorced in 1986.
Aw.
They remained close until his passing. And I tried to look for a reason. I couldn't find much, but reportedly, Jane had just commented at one point that he was just so busy with his
Yeah.
work. He
Yeah.
didn't really have time for her or the kids.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what was behind it. But again, very amicable. That may have been, I'm thinking the timing is interesting. Maybe that's what's prompted him to do this. A couple of the things that he noted, he mentioned in one of these letters that he would like a nice, friendly little service.
Nobody to wear black. Is that right?
Nobody to wear black.
Yeah.
Maybe a rousing Dixieland band. Yeah. And one of his memorable lines from the letter to his kids was included in the program at the service. It said, "Please watch out for each other and love and forgive everybody. It's a good life. Enjoy it." And a quote from a New York Times archived article that I found, it was published in 1990, said, "Brian Henson read parts of letters that he said his father had written to the family 4 years ago to be read after his death. In it, Mr. Henson said he was not afraid of death, but had, quote, much curiosity and interest, end quote, in it, and was waiting to say hi to those who had gone before him. It feels strange to be writing this while I am still alive," he wrote, "but it wouldn't be easy after I go." "Don't feel bad that I've gone," he wrote at a different point. "I look forward to seeing all of you when you come over." And then this article continues to say, near the end of the 2.5-hour memorial service, performers sang a Muppet medley. They wore street clothes, but their voices were in character, and they concluded by waving handheld Muppets in the air to the cheers of the congregation. Then the band led the way out, playing "When the Saints Go
Oh my
Marching
gosh.
In." And that's...
I would not have made it. I would have been a weeping mess. Oh,
I'm telling you, I watched I saw all of that part because it was like 15 minutes long. It started with some of his key Muppet members, like Frank Oz was one of them, you know, some of the ones who did the central characters who were in the thick of everything. And they were just doing this little medley of, and they did not have their
You've
Muppets
got it on
out.
video?
Well, it's on YouTube. Yeah, you can
When I
totally.
need a good cry, I'm going to watch it.
It's in the show notes. So,
Okay.
And it was lighthearted because they were singing all of his favorites and they were
Yeah,
all
but
fun and
still-
lighthearted. And then they got to the end, and for the final song, they put on their Muppets.
Oh, gosh.
And they sang the last song. If I recall, it was that song about believe in you, believe in us. I can't remember the exact title. And then the other characters, Big Bird, all the other characters started joining them on stage until it was filled. It was filled with all these characters this man was behind. It was very moving. It was, yes. So it was super touching, a beautiful way to end that tribute to him. So just a few last notes. We're wrapping this up, but during his career, Jim's various works were nominated for more awards than I have time to tell you. He was posthumously inducted into the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 1991, and he received the Disney Legends Award in 2011. And I can tell you that when I started to research him, I literally put in a search for most famous puppeteer of all time, and his name came up again and again and again to this day. Disney did acquire the Muppets from the Henson family in February of 2004. I believe it was in the works before he passed, but then things kind of got put on hold. That brings us to that question. This is why there are now warnings on some of these little warning comments on some of the episodes, because at the time they came out, some of the content was very acceptable at the time, but now it has not aged well. You know, people look back and go, wow, you know, this was, you know, something maybe that was insensitive racially or in other ways. And so there is now a little disclaimer that comes up. I think it's something like 18 episodes that start with this little screen that has basically a little warning. This program includes negative depictions and or mistreatment of people or cultures. These stereotypes were wrong then and are wrong now. Rather than remove this content, we want to acknowledge its harmful impact, learn from it, and spark conversation to create a more inclusive future together. Disney is committed to creating stories with inspirational and aspirational themes that reflect the rich diversity of the human experience around the globe. To learn more about these stories and how they've impacted society, visit, and then it has their website.
Interesting.
Yeah. However, despite the fact that Disney has now acquired that, the Henson Company is still going. They are still putting out new projects, and the Henson family they're all over it.
Yeah, saying that, I think Brian Henson was the one in charge of Muppet Treasure Island. That might have been his first film. Don't quote me on that, but I know that maybe both of them were. I don't remember.
Yeah,
I think
I didn't look that up,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't surprise me because the Henson kids, I mean, this is their work, you know? And I thought I would bring this to a close by sharing this last little quote from the Henson Company website. This is again from their bio on Jim. I thought this might be a nice way to lead us into our armchair. It says, Jim Henson, an extraordinary artist and visionary, invented unique worlds and characters that remain just as vivid, original, and fresh today as when they were created. A television pioneer, an innovator in puppetry, technology, and visual arts, and a performer who literally brought to life some of the most memorable characters ever, including the world's most famous frog, Kermit. Jim Henson's impact on entertainment, education, and culture continues to this day.
yes, it does.
Armchair psychologist.
For our armchair, Ashley, I know you are a huge fan. I came into it as somebody who didn't know what I didn't know.
You didn't realize you were a huge fan, but you are.
Yes. So I thought I would ask you, what surprised you most about Jim Henson as we were going through this? Or what did this affirm for you about him and his work?
Well, I guess the thing that surprised me is that him and his wife got a divorce. So that was surprising to me. I did not know that, had not heard that. But, I mean, unfortunately, it kind of makes sense. I don't know. Through our podcast, we have talked about it seems as though you cannot be massively successful in the public sphere without there being some kind of suffering in your private life. I don't know. Maybe we'll come across someone at one point in our research that had both. I just can't think of one. But it's like you make the public happy at the cost of your family's personal happiness. But I am happy to hear that his kids, even though he may have spent less time with them, they have continued valued his work.
Yeah.
So
and are very skilled at it.
yeah, really,
Yeah.
really good at it. So that part surprised me, but I guess upon reflection doesn't surprise me. I'm sad about that. The part that it affirmed.
Can I speak to what
Yeah.
you just brought up? Because what you made me realize, I have a different answer, but your thought sparked a new one for me, which is I think this broke my illusion. You know, I think I went into this and you just kind of have this very superficial little idea of this man and his work. And not only did it kind of pull back the curtain and let me see behind the work itself, I now understand so much more. In fact, seeing pictures
Of their
of them
hands.
and how many...
Their hands must have been so tired.
And the way that, yes, they would
Their
contort
arms.
themselves, and like 3 or 4 of them are on top of each
Yep.
other in order to move this one
Yep.
character. And this is all happening below
Yep.
below them. And like, so
Like the Muppets are on the second story and they're in the first story. You know, they're
yes,
up here.
it's crazy. But to your point, it also broke my illusion of him as a man, because of course this makes sense. If you're going to dedicate yourself and you're going to spend this much time on your work, other things probably
Yeah.
did suffer.
Yeah.
So it definitely helped me to see and understand things I'd never seen before.
Sounds like our gain was Jane's loss. You know?
Yeah.
It's just sad. I'm sorry
Yeah.
for her.
Yeah, I do feel bad about that too. I think the other thing that I would say, what surprised me most was what I started with. I'm circling back. I would have thought of him as a puppeteer and a performer. Like that's who I would, the artist. I would have seen him as the artist. To hear about how groundbreaking he was, how he was constantly looking for the new animations, the new
Innovation.
filmmaking techniques, the new animatronics. Just like what new thing can we do next? Oh, let's put a children's show per se, if that's, how people see it, in prime time, and let's make it appeal to everybody. Just constantly thinking of new things. I go back to Ron Howard's title, The Idea Man.
Yeah.
I never knew that about him,
Yeah.
but I respect it and I admire it a lot.
Me too. And I guess the thing it affirmed for me is his work, with the exception of the Dark Crystal and a little bit of Labyrinth, really just makes me happy.
Yeah.
It feels like my
yeah.
childhood. It just feels like happiness and sunshine and goodness. And he makes me smile. His work makes me smile.
I think this will be my last comment, but the other thing that I appreciated was everything was intentional. Fraggle Rock was brought out because they were really trying to promote peace and an appreciation for, multicultural populations, people getting along with each other. We had Sesame Street that was about trying to educate
Education.
children who did not have access to some of the opportunities that they needed. Like there were definitely intentional, whatever they were, whether they were bits or skits or movies or whatever, that were designed to talk about service things like taking care of our world, protecting the rainforest. I mean, like there were some very intentional reasons that tended to be really good behind a lot of their works.
In the guise of entertainment.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to our cheers. And since you're such a huge fan, I'm going to let you have this one, Ashley.
Well, to Kermie and Miss Piggy and all the things and people that he created and all the ideas and innovations that he made, thank you, Jim Henson, for bringing such joy and kindness and love and rainbow connections into our life. Cheers to you.
Cheers. If you love what we do, please rate and review our show. Or you can become a supporter by making a donation through buymeacoffee.com/scandalwaterpod. Whether a single gift or a recurring monthly donation, it would go a long way towards supporting our work and allowing us to keep the tea brewing.
At our website, www.scandalwaterpodcast.com, you can submit questions or your own story ideas, access our sources and show notes, see the merch we offer for sale, and more. You can join the Scandal Water community through our Scandal Water Podcast Facebook page or follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Scandal Water Podcast.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music. Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.